Hello, welcome to our panel on the future of work. My name is Brian Cross. I'm one of the executive leaders of Esri and responsible for the professional services division of the company. And I'm very excited to be joined by Mark Zirkelbach and Luke Cooper. Mark is from Loma Linda University down the street from Esri. He is the CIO, and Luke is one of the leads at Arup, who is responsible for their indoor mapping initiatives. And today we're going to be talking about the future of work and indoor mapping. So I'd like to introduce our two panelists and pass it to them. Luke, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? And thank you for joining us.
Sure, crikey. Well, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me to this. I'm Luke Cooper. I work for Arup. I'm a digital specialist and a lead within the UK. I actually sit in Cardiff, but I'm really great to be here and to share some of the work that we've done using indoors and our broader smart building work.
Luke, thank you for being here. And Mark, not so far away from me down the street, thank you for joining us.
Sure, happy to participate. Mark Zirkelbach from Loma Linda University Health, and we are in Southern California, just geographically just a little bit down the road from Esri's headquarters. We're an academic medical center. It means we have hospitals and clinics and schools and a large campus and lots of facilities to try to keep track of and make it easy for people to get around. So happy to share some of our experiences with you.
Well, thank you so much for being with us today. I'd like to begin just by providing a little bit more context as you both introduced who you are in your organization, but maybe get into a little bit more about how your organization uses space and why you were thinking about indoor mapping as a sort of a key strategy for you. So Mark, I'll come back to you with this first. Tell us a little bit more about Loma Linda and the spaces that you manage.
Well, if any of us have sort of been to a large campus with lots of signage, maybe even outdated signage, arrows going this way and that, you can relate to the challenge of I'm trying to get from here to here, and I'm not exactly sure if I should park here. I'm not exactly sure if I should go into this building. I'm looking around for someone to ask. It seems like they know what's going on. And so we've been trying very hard for a long time to make it easy to have a really good experience getting to our campus or getting to our facilities that are off campus, and sort of guiding you from that need to getting to the spot without having to fret about it. It's nothing worse than being late for class or having to go to a new room that you're not familiar with. Or in our case, we're building a new hospital that we'll be transitioning to here very soon in the next couple of months. It's 1 million new square feet that we have to get familiar with. And so we're really looking at these kinds of tools from Esri to make it easy for us to engage in that sort of huge incremental space that's going to happen sort of all at once.
So Mark, it's interesting you mentioned a couple different constituents. You mentioned students at the medical school, and I think implied at least was patients and maybe people who are helping those patients visiting the facility. And I can certainly second as a user of your facility too. It's big, it's powerful, it's impressive, but it's also daunting to try to understand where is radiology or where is something else. Is your target audience both the workers and students as well as the sort of end public who's using the facility, or is one ahead of the other? How do you think about that?
Well, it'd be nice if we could just focus on sort of one constituency, but that's never the case. So we use the term consumer and focus on a very great experience, and consumers get defined multiple ways as you were referencing. So it's our employees, it's students, it's people that need care at the hospital or patients at the clinic. It's their family members that are dropping them off, picking them up, visiting. So it's really anybody that needs to navigate our campus and our multiple buildings. So we try to make sure that we look through a consumer lens and we see everybody that has this need and try to focus on how to best help them with the technology.
That's great. Thank you, Mark. And it's ambitious. It's a great timing as you build the new hospital, which I've seen going up, and it's quite an impressive facility. Luke, I'd like to turn it to you, and maybe you can frame the conversation in the same way for your organization. What's the context in which you're thinking about indoor mapping, and how is it helping your organization be successful?
Yeah, sure. Well, yeah. So Arup, first of all, we're an independent employee-owned firm. We've got designers, planners, engineers, architects, consultants, technical specialists working across everything in the built environment. And there's probably two aspects of what we do. There's how we provide things for our clients. And our clients are a really broad, rich base, from cities, energy, healthcare, education, water, environment, building portfolio. And then there's also ourselves. And we also have the same problem that a lot of our clients, that we are trying to advise about how we are managing and using and want to use our space. Ourselves as an organization, we've got 16,000 staff globally across 94 offices, 16 of which just within the UK that I've been primarily focusing so far. So there's a big thing about how we're using that space, and those different types of users kind of fall into three main categories for us. First of all, there's staff, people who are using it, they're engaged with it, they're part of the Arup firm. Secondly, there's the externals, people who are collaborators or clients who are working using our space that may have never been there. So it's really important so that their experience is as fluid and natural as possible. And there's also our facility managers as well, who basically are trying to understand what we're using it for, but what should we be using it for, and how can we respond to those sort of challenges. So it's really important that we kind of understand that asset life cycle for us, but also how then we help it for our clients as well, while we're looking at doing basically a similar sort of stuff and conversations externally as well. So yeah, it's really rich, and it's probably multi-dimensional for us.
Well, that's really interesting, Luke. And you brought up another persona that we didn't talk about earlier, which is the facility manager for your organization. So as I interact with different organizations who use indoor mapping technology, there's many different use cases on the facility side. Are you using it for things like planning out space, how you organize teams within your offices, or how many, or more like real estate portfolio management? Or maybe you could elaborate on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, it's kind of when you start opening this bottle, it's like the genie in the lamp that starts to just come out and go, oh, could you do this? Yeah, you could do this. So at the moment, some of the things that we are absolutely looking at is, well, how are we using desks? Something which used to be so core and traditional, moving away from this is your desk, to an activity-based approach. So, I want this desk for a period of time. It may be a different desk from day to day, just what's available, and also who am I sitting near. So that is a real big challenge and difference about how we are using those space. What desks are actually the most used? Is it next to the window? People always sometimes have got preferences. So it's really important to gauge how are we using those spaces. And yeah, absolutely, we're capturing how people are using our traditional assets like desks and coming in. And that's really important, both from a network and a social perspective about how are these interactions going on, also from a practical perspective as well, which is, well, actually, are people always going down this corridor? Why aren't they going down there? Is it because it's a bit dark, or is there an environment why people are avoiding it? And then also looking at the sensors, so our less traditional assets about collaboration workspaces and how are they being used. So yeah, already some of our preliminary data is quite exciting, and we're getting a lot of engagement about how this could be used going forward as well.
Thanks, Luke. I have one more quick follow-up for you, and then I'm going to turn it back to Mark. But at the beginning of your introduction, you talked about you as a firm, you support clients with architecture, design, built environment problems, and then you also need to manage your own teams. And we've been talking about how you use indoor technology to manage your own work. But what I think I heard you say, and I just want to confirm, is that you're also setting an example for your end customers that you work with on how they can use the latest technology to change how they think about work and the workspace. Is that correct, that you're also sort of
Yeah,
consulting with different clients about it?
exactly. In fact, we've got quite a rich base across the asset life cycle about space management and how we're using stuff. So, for example, we've got something called mass motion, which is for stadiums and pedestrians to workflow, and it's rich information. But indoors sits in that kind of operation and future analysis stuff, which is really exciting proposal. And it's one of those things that, if we speak to our clients and they go, well, how do you solve this problem? It kind of removes some of the credit if you're not actually putting into practice stuff that you're recommending. It's exactly the same scenario, but for valid reasons. And we are stress testing those reasons to understand, are they actually valid? And it's not just about applying technology for technology's sake, but going back and going, what's the why? Why are we doing this?
Yeah. What kind of outcomes can you drive? Well, I can say we at Esri, we sometimes say eating our own soup. And I can share that we also use the same technology for our own campus in-house as well, because we think it's important to eat our own soup, and it's fun to have the developers of the product using it themselves too. So, Mark, I'd like to turn back to you. Clearly, you've had a lot going on with the hospital construction and all the IT modernization that a CIO needs to worry about at the same time. And then there's this little thing, the global pandemic that hit in the middle of it. And I'm interested to understand, A, that probably affected your ability to achieve some of the things that you're working on. And B, it may have pivoted some of the requirements on you in the midst of it. Could you talk a little bit about how that changed your initiative?
Well, as we can all relate to sort of where I am and where, how relative that is to, I'll just say, maybe emerging concerns or traffic patterns or, things that we used to not think about, pretty quickly became top of mind. So being able to route, I'll say our sales employees or patients to the most preferred route in order to minimize exposure to each other or to give them the safest possible path became pretty important overnight. And, there were lots of efforts to just be able to track. So who have you been around and where do you want to go, or if you need to go somewhere, what's the best way to do it? So all those things became top of mind pretty quickly. And so the technology is one of those things. And I think that's what I really appreciate the most about this technology is there is really no end in the use cases. It's very adaptable. I'm assuming it's just because we all really care about where we are and where we're going. That's very relevant to us, and what's the quickest way to get there, the safest way. So I think that would probably be the most compelling situation is we want to get you from point A to point B, and we want to be able to route you in a safe way without making it your worry per se. We want to try to ease that burden and again have a really good experience when you're interacting with us.
Yeah, and as a healthcare provider who was really at ground zero, and Loma Linda is a level 1 trauma center for our whole region, in COVID, it really can make a difference to have technology that can adapt as well. So I almost think of what you might have needed to do there as similar to an outdoor GIS where there's a traffic accident on the freeway and the DOTs and others are routing people around it. It's the same kind of thing, I'm sure, when you had a COVID wing or wings at times where you really needed to manage traffic and make sure you didn't have anybody casually wandering through those units. It's quite powerful to think about sort of how the spatial technology could work.
Yes.
You also got into another area, which is sort of what we would call location analytics related to density of people or travel or patterns of work. That tends to not be in the first phase of people adopting indoor mapping, but is that something, because you brought it up, something you're thinking about for the future where you can look at workspace use and patterns of activity in the hospital and then optimize space from there?
It's definitely on our radar. Probably the easiest example I can give you that we're working on now is we have visitors, and we want to know who's visiting us, and so there's a focus on who are you, and why are you here? Who are you here to see, most likely? Or if you're a vendor, there's different scenarios. So that's really very important for us to be able to say, we want to integrate sort of who's here and why with where they are and where they should be. And so we're trying to bring those two problems together, and the GIS is a big part of that solution, so that we can have systems or platforms that talk to each other and be able to, to answer questions like, is someone on the third floor? Should they be on the third floor? It doesn't look like they should be based on the reason for their visit. Or even a simpler scenario, we have employees here that, their job is to be out and about, and security officers, for example. We just had a conversation with our security team where they'd like to know where their security officers are. They had a situation where one got into a little bit of a jam, and it took a bit to find that person. And we believe that we can very simply show where people are, and if there's some kind of an issue about where they are or needing to find them quickly, that we're going to be able to do that as well. So yes, where people are, where things are, and being able to correlate those to other processes and other platforms is really critical for us in the future.
That's really interesting, Mark. What you're bringing up to me there is these different kinds of use cases in the future workplace. And I've seen in other situations, some sort of our large campus high-tech companies using the technology. Their first use case, was campus security. And that's where they began, is what you just described, situational awareness for a large campus, trying to make sure everything is safe and secure. And then they've pivoted into other use cases like the two of you have talked about employee experience or visitor experience. I think it's fascinating to see how these things grow from one area to another. A third area that I've seen some organizations really getting into is asset management within their space. And it occurs to me, Mark, that in hospitals, you have some very expensive assets that get moved, like X-ray machines or other very high-tech equipment that may be in limited supply. And maybe that's not in your work now, but is that part of your planning, that you'd have geotagged assets that you would know where they are in the hospital at any time?
So there's two ends of it. Yes, for sure. We're doing it in bits and pieces, but we're in our new hospital. We definitely want to be able to do that on scale. But there's sort of two ends of that problem. There's I'll say very high cost, precious assets, maybe drugs that we have to keep track of and where they are. And on the other end of the scale, very simple things, but very critical things like, so where's the wheelchair, or where's the IV pole, and being able to know where the closest one is, or hey, where's the person that's going to take this patient down to X-ray? We need a stat, we need a stat order here, and we don't want to just randomly say, hey, can you send someone up? We want to know sort of where the closest person is, and reach out to that person and get them to the location as quickly as possible so the care can be provided. But there's always a journey, right? And you got to get this person to this location. What's it take to make that happen? Traditionally it's just, well, there's 5 people to do it, so we'll just sort of reach out, and whoever hears it, we'll start heading that way. We want to reach out to the most appropriate person and make sure that happens as conveniently and efficiently as possible.
And you would do that through mobile devices that have indoor maps on them, and then you push notify somebody and say, you need to go here?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, exactly.
It's very powerful. It's sort of like a revolution in the hospital space, and I can imagine quite a few other hospitals may be watching with great interest what you're up to here. Luke, I'd like to turn it back to you. Let's talk a little bit more about some of the use cases you see on a daily basis, and sort of how are people using the tools to make work smarter for you? And then I'd like to ask you a follow-up about kind of where you're going. What's next for Arup and looking at this?
Cool. So I mean, certainly some of the stuff that Mark was talking about, absolutely applicable. Certainly the finding people and the security that you were talking about absolutely resonates completely. can't remember how many times I was going around the office going, I need to find this person. Where are they? I just looked like a headless chicken going from floor to floor just to look for them. Going, I'm near the printer. And it was really difficult. That was a day-to-day problem that we have and had. But we've been able to use Indoors and connect it with, say, our networking, so that we're able to work out, hey, they've got a device that's logged in. Therefore, that's where they are. That's been a known location to where they are. And that's really transformed what we are doing with this space and how we are able to find people. So that's been a big aspect. And particularly, as I was mentioning about swift activity-based working, it becomes even more important. And I think that's going to be really important when people are not just tied to their laptop, but it's actually just mobile devices. Desks are kind of being moved aside in many ways so that the spaces that we use are more about collaboration spaces, as opposed to that traditional, you go into the office, you've got a desk. But I also think it's also changing. Indoors, it enables us to do kind of busyness management. I remember the amount of time it was like getting really busy. It's like, I can't even find a desk. And again, going like headless chicken just to find, in this case, a desk for me to go to. Because again, we weren't able to provide a user experience to do that. So from an asset perspective of what's available and where it is, has also been a big aspect for the push. And then I would say also it's understanding that manual, how we are using the space. We used to have someone come in with a clipboard going, right, we've got X number of people here now. And they used to do these surveys floor by floor for over a week to understand how we're using those spaces. But obviously, if we start trying to work out what that is with sensors and some of our network information, it kind of saves that massively and gives probably a more accurate detail as opposed to a dipstick 2-week window while you do a survey. And then also the visitors going into the office, we found it really difficult, particularly where, say, in Cardiff, we've got our offices, which are Abertawe, Cardiff, where it doesn't actually describe where it is in the building. So we found it really difficult. So they were some of our big things of going, right, what is it that we need to do and provide an element for that. Just picking up what you were saying about the COVID aspect, that's also been a big drive. I think the contact tracing has been a big push. Also anxiety, we found anxiety for people when offices have been reopened. They didn't know really what to expect, and the layout may have changed because of our social distancing. What am I going to look at? We found that when we were looking at our people as being something that they really wanted to understand. What am I likely to expect when I go to the office? What will it look like? Who's going to be there? And enabling that sort of information to be there has been really powerful from a well-being perspective, as well as then just planning, navigation, some of the same things that Mark was talking about. How am I routing? And that broader space optimization work as well. So yeah, that's probably not even a non-exhaustive, but it's certainly changing. And I think one of the big things as well, just one last thing, just on that, how we are using space. COVID's really changed about how we are using the office, like I was saying, and Arup has just come out as quite a bold thing to say that we'll be in, certainly within the UK, 2 days a week within the office, but it's flexible. So, if you want to work from home because it's better for you, then you do. And if you then want to go into the office to meet with the clients, then that's the space. It's really pivoting about how we are using that space completely. And we're asking loads of questions about what does that mean and are people comfortable with that? And it's a big change for us.
Yeah, you're really talking about a big paradigm shift that all organizations who are in the sort of information age work, and Mark has some of this, but probably not all of it because your frontline work is with patients in a medical facility, but I know you've gone remote for some of it. But Luke, maybe one little extra part just to understand, it's such a different approach than maybe many people listening to this have had before when you think about the way you run your offices. How does an employee actually interact with technology to experience that more fluid workplace where you're there only some of the days of the week, and then you don't have an actual permanent location that you're going to when you arrive at the campus? Is it done through the mobile phone? Is it done through websites? Maybe just a quick glimpse into the sort of the moment of life of an employee working in this new way.
Absolutely. So one of the big things is, first of all, probably in a weird way, a non-technical, is a conversation. We're doing quite a lot of things at the moment to speak to our staff about what are we comfortable with as an organization. And that's really important because people have all got different situations about how they want to be using it. And when it comes to, for example, going back into the office, it all starts with a conversation. What do you want to be using it for? How can we help? What does that mean for you? Are there things that you need? Are there things that you're worried about? So it's very much actually conversation driven and human driven as opposed to technology. We do have loads of other things that connect to it. So one big aspect is training as well. So, we've got our own custom courses about coming back into the office, for example. What are they likely to expect? Have they got questions, contacts? But also they've got links to our indoors deployment, so indoors at Arup link. And that gives them basically all the asset mapping linking. But we've also built on top of it to provide some of that booking features, for example, that people are really needing to use, for example, right now. So people are using different sort of ways in, but it tries to be rich and flexible. Some of our offices, for example, we're allowing them that actually coordinators are managing it all for them because they feel like it's probably more appropriate for them than a staff perspective. They could be for a multitude of different reasons. But yeah, absolutely everything has to be accessible as possible. The app itself, we use it through the web app version. But going forward, I think some of the things like the notifications, going down the native app is definitely probably the way forward that we are looking at. But yeah, at the moment, the mapping is such a vital part. It's the first route in.
Great, thanks, Luke. Mark, you have, as I referenced a minute ago, you've got a very diverse organization when you think about the patient mission, but then of course you have thousands of people running the organization in IT and in finance and everything else. And you talk about that sort of different kind of professional work in the facility. Are you foreseeing the kinds of fluid changes that Luke is talking about at his organization in terms of where people work and how you organize your spaces?
We're certainly trying to figure out, like everyone else, so what's the right mix? The term that's thrown around most is hybrid, which means a little bit of everything, and that's that's probably the hardest to manage, at least from a predictable way. So we're evaluating, and this is where you start looking at return on investment sorts of things enter into it. Convenience and experience are at the top of the list, but what does it mean to our bottom line? So we're looking at our space. The interesting thing for us in IS, and it happened for finance as well, is just sort of part of how an organization grows. We were developing a campus that was sort of deemed the administrative campus, where IS, HR, finance were located. And I'll just say, right before the pandemic, we had moved into a very collaborative space. We went out of our way to make sure it was easy to connect. And within a couple of months of moving in, you could hear crickets in that building because no one was here. Everyone was working remotely. Well, now we're sort of coming back to, well, what's it look like now in the future, and what is work going to be like? We're saying, well, we probably don't need all of this space all the time. Let's start evaluating what space we need, how we would make it available to people, and repurpose space. In other words, consolidate maybe what was for 3 departments into one, and make the other space available for our core mission, which is patient care. So that's what's right in front of us right now. We're in fact have my second committee meeting today about, so how are we going to do this? How are we going to pull this off? And I'm very confident that some of the technology that we have available will inform some of the decisions and help us do it in a very effective way for our employees.
Yeah, I think that's something that a lot of organizations are facing right now. And Luke and his team have kind of gone all in on this idea. There's a jargon term, at least in indoor mapping, called hoteling, which is something that really just means giving people temporary workspace that they can reserve on the fly, whether it's for 2 hours or for a week. And I know even in my operation at Esri, we've been talking about that. How much should we go to hoteling, and is it just for employees who live somewhere else and are visiting, or is it actually for core members of our team? And it's been really helpful to see technology that allows you to just reserve those hotels on your mobile phone on your way into work, and then manage as team leads the space and who's where and how many people are in. And if there's extra cleaning that's needed to be done these days, where have those people been in that footprint? I'd like to just pivot a little bit and talk about what advice you would give other organizations who might be heading down this path. Luke, what would you tell them if they're thinking about embarking on an indoor mapping future of work event?
Yeah, well, I think the number one thing, and we've been kind of touching it, is what is that kind of the why, and what's that asset life cycle look like? So what does your future workspace look like, but also what is your current future workspace? And it's really important to think about your operations, analysis from that, possible redesign, scenario validation, and around again. I think that's really important because we have to be flexible in how we are managing and using those spaces. And that's been probably a key thing for us. So for example, for us as a business, we've got indoors for our operations. We then shove it into kind of our analysis. We use things such as Neuron and our property insight within the organization. We then have a redesign. So we use things like Space Explorer, which allows us to do parametric analysis based on that analysis. And then we use something called mass motion, which I mentioned, which is that kind of pedestrian movement and validation of it. And that's really, that sort of asset lifecycle really has got to be one of the driving things going forward. I think then it's about, well, what is it that you're trying to achieve? Engage with the people, the users across all of them about what do they want to be using those spaces for, and start with the conversation. And then probably workflows, understanding those workflows. What do they look like? Are they effective? Are they real? Are they right? I'd also say for us, it's also been engaging with that broader building standards as well, to make sure it's compatible. So for example, if you want to do a redesign, if you've got, hey, all of this data, how do you make sure it's compatible to do our redesign? So for example, if we're using our building information modeling, making sure that it's compliant with ISO 19650, our building topology, about how we are naming the assets and those units, for example, following things such as the building device and asset naming standards, which is from the Open Data Institute, which is going forward, as well as the building topology ontology. And those things you just Google, and there's already a bunch of work which is about trying to ratify those as a standard so you can interact and change things. But then ultimately it's about what you're going to be using it for, and what information do you want to show to people, and what information do you think you might want to see, and engage with those. A big success for us is about not just creating something that then only a small community of developers or geospatial professionals can connect to, but actually all users. So for instance, enabling it so that, if you've got your own dashboard software or your own other data information, that you can connect to it, so the data is open and accessible. So that for us is the main thing, making it open, accessible, and asking about the why.
Thank you.
Long answer. Sorry,
no,
Brian.
it's good. No, it's good. I think there's a few things that are really critical that I want to highlight, is being really clear on we would use the term information products. What is the problem you're solving? But then I also heard you say, think bigger and step back and say, where are you going as an organization? Because there may be a use case right in front of you, but then there's a broader context in which you can be working in this space. Mark, what would you say to another hospital, for example, or others that approached you and said, what do we need to be thinking about? How should we go about this journey of indoor mapping?
Well, when you're introducing, I'll say, a new capability or a new technology, you just need to be ready for that journey. We've been at this for a while. When we first started engaging in the folks that were using GIS, and we'd look around the room, we didn't see anybody like us. We didn't see a lot of providers. It was, more agency oriented, more, maybe public health would be the closest. They saw a lot of value in it, and it took us a bit to correlate. So how can this help us? And once you start to get that insight, you need to be prepared for the journey. And so I think, as Luke said, talking about the why, the construct that we talk about is what, so what, and now what, and getting people sort of understanding those 3 steps and being willing to adopt, because it's really about adoption. You can have the coolest stuff, and if people can't find value or don't understand it and don't use it, then it doesn't pay for itself, or it doesn't bring the value that you were hoping for. So I would just say it is a journey. It's a change. You start looking at it, and you have to imagine sort of how it can help, but it doesn't take very long to see those use cases. But it's such a different technology. Just a really simple example. We're learning that our health is really not impacted most significantly by what happens in the hospital or in the clinic, maybe 10 to 20%. What's really impacting that is sort of where I live, where I work, my environment, the community I'm in. And so helping people see, wow, we got to look at this big picture. At Loma Linda, we have this saying, to make man whole. And there's no better way to achieve that than by stepping back and looking at, so what is the whole picture of health? And how can we bring things like GIS to the table to help us in that journey? And so I'll just underscore, it is a journey, and you have to help people understand it and adopt it and get value, or there's probably just frustration at the end of that journey.
That's really interesting, Mark. So one of my takeaways from what you just said is, as an organization, while you may have had very specific use cases for spatial technology, what you're really achieving in many different areas, including the understanding the community, is sort of a location intelligence for your organization that cuts across any particular use case. It's sort of additive as you work on where do you put clinics, and how do you route people inside the building, and how do you plan for your next building. It all adds up to an organization that's thinking spatially, which of course makes us feel good here at Esri, because that's what we think about every day, all day. It's really nice to hear. I would like to just sort of ask you each one more question as we close, but to do that, I want to acknowledge both organizations here are, excuse me, I have a little bit of background noise for 1 second, but you're both very progressive in this space, and that's why we asked you on. You are pushing the boundaries of what a modern workplace looks like, and I appreciate your leadership in this, and I think many will look to you as examples, as beacons for what can be done to make employee experience better, patient experience better, and be smarter in the way that you manage your work. And I guess to kind of take that forward, I'd like to hear from each of you really what success looks like, and some of the outcomes that you've already been able to achieve at sort of a business level, not at a technical level, that maybe underscore the importance of the mission that you're on. Luke, why don't we start with you?
I think probably one of the main things is really about first of all, our people and our well-being. And when I talk about well-being, it's cut across kind of 3 angles. It's you, yourself, you as your team, and then also you and your clients. And it's really important that works, that you're able to weave across all of those different 3 angles really successfully, and that ultimately the space enables and gets the most out of that. I think the technology is an enabler, But for me, that is the ultimate driver about what is it that you're trying to do and why. And that's from an Arup perspective. I think the future then is, right, well, what does that mean to other people? What does that mean to our client base? They've probably got different things that they are thinking about, and how technology, but also a broader transformation, particularly from a post-COVID era, what does that look like? And what are the spaces, and what will the spaces be of the future? So yeah, for me, it's about all of those things driven fundamentally about people and what we're trying to achieve.
Thank you, Luke. That's really inspiring and a nice way to frame it around real people doing real work. Mark, what does success look like for you, and where are you on that journey?
Well, so, I'll just assuming that that we've been able to introduce the technology in meaningful ways, then as I would look back at it, it would be that we're able to make more informed decisions about sort of all the aspects that we've been referencing during this conversation, sort of, from a patient or employee perspective, visitor, an interested potential client. It's the full gamut. So we're always trying to make decisions, and we always recognize when it's a struggle to make a decision because we don't have the information that we need at our hands. And so we go through a process of trying to put information together, and the processes are hardly ever repeatable, and could you come up with the same answer if you did it again tomorrow, sort of thing. So to me, it'd be very successful knowing that we have been able to introduce this new aspect of space and location and make it much easier without a heavy lift to make informed decisions about any aspect of an asset or a person and the location of it and how to get to it. That would be, that'd put a smile on everyone's face, I believe.
Thank you so much. That's really great insight from both of you to close. And once again, I would like to thank you both for your leadership in the space, for what your organizations are doing to pioneer and really explore the future of work. And we very much appreciate your partnership with Esri and your joining us today on this panel. So thank you very much. And with that, we'll close and look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, appreciate the time.